Welcome to the Okanagan Garden Report this week. Ken Salvail here, and we're just having a look at a few different plants today. We've got three topics. We've got butterfly bushes, we've got plum trees, and we also have irrigation startup. So stay tuned, we'll talk about those things right now. Butterfly bush is a beautiful plant, blooms all the summertime. Very drought tolerant, tough. This one's actually living in literally a big pile of gravel. It's been here for quite a few years, but it's quite tame and quite manageable. Gets hardly any water. But now it's time to prune it on a mild winter like this. It's got lots of new shoots coming on it. So I know the wood is good. So I have two options. I can just cut this thing nearly to the ground, down to about 2 feet high, 1.5 feet high if I want, just cut everything off and it just shoots back. But what I find is sometimes when you do that, the branches are not quite not strong enough, you could say, not quite enough stability in the plant for wind and whatnot. So in this case, what I like to do is just cut off the bloom heads and keep most of the silvery growth inside. So that's basically what I'm going to do now, is just really quickly go over this thing and cut the tips of the branches off. And I'm preserving a lot of this nice silvery growth. And you can see this branch here, I don't know if you can see that, but that's a beautiful branch there. Just cutting off some of this dead stuff. But I'm keeping these nice silvery leaves. And the reason again is I'm keeping the framework of the plant so it holds itself up and it can handle the weight of the blooms, it can handle some wind. Cutting out any of the dead wood that's dying off. Butterfly bushes are prone to a lot of dead wood. And if we get a really cold winter, these plants will actually sometimes die right to the ground. And in which case you're fine, because you just do as I was saying, cut it right down, it shoots right back up again. So over here on this side, we're looking at a plum tree. And plums are easy. These are prune plums, one of the easiest trees to grow. This one's getting to be quite a tangled mess just because it's been here for quite a few years. But it's just got some buds pushing right now and probably be in bloom within about 10 days. But it's still time to prune this guy, so I'm going to get in and take out all the sucker growth, all the verticals. I'm keeping a lot of this stuff at hand height. This is the easiest place for picking, but you can see there's a lot of branch growth, so I got to thin it out a bit so that the sunlight can penetrate and get onto that fruit. And this particular tree really produces a lot of fruit, and one of my favorites. Prune plums are just awesome. There's a lot of good uses for them, but really easy, hardly any sprays at all. This tree really doesn't get any sprays, so it's kind of a fun fruit tree to grow. It doesn't require much work. We're going to have a little walk over here and talk about irrigation startup. So right now we're in early April, and this is when irrigation is coming to mind, and many people may be getting phone calls from their irrigation company saying it's time to start up the system. But just remember that it's not something that you have to do excuse me, right away, early in the season. But it is something that when you have a company that has to come out and test your system, which is what they should be doing, come out, run through the zones, make sure everything works. They're firing up your system, but they're really just testing it. You don't have to start running it right away. But once they have it turned on, then it's your option. You could run it once or twice, say before May comes, and then once the heat of May comes in, you start running your regular schedules. So the important thing is allowing whoever blew out the system in the fall, generally you want them to come back and start it up. And they should be guaranteeing their blowout so that if parts are frozen or broken because of frost damage, and how you can tell that is if you do see a piece of pipe and it has a spiral fracture that runs down the pipe, that's usually frost damage. If it's a crack right straight across the pipe, that's usually not frost. But typically any company should be able to guarantee their work and make sure they do those repairs at no charge. But they should come out and test the system and get it up and going quite early. We're going to have a quick look down here in the valve box, and you'll be able to see a few different things down here. In this valve box, this has actually got a filter in it. And there's several valves. This one has 4 different valves in it, but there's a filter in here, and I'll see if I can get that filter off. There we go. Typically in the springtime, filters are pulled out. This is a little disc filter. And this is you just run some water on these filters just to clean them off. Generally that's done in the spring, but you do it once in the summertime as well, like after the spring runoff happens. But do not use any detergents on these because they're made of nylon and they're subject to disintegration from different chemicals. So that's your filter. A lot of these valve boxes may have filters in them. The valves themselves, what the guys do is they'll test them. Sometimes these things, they can be turned on or off manually, and sometimes they're left on after the blowout. So one of the things that the guys do when they come back is they'll usually come in, fire up the system. Here, this one is actually on. So we just make sure they're all turned off manually. Then we go in, turn on the water supply, let the water populate the system very slowly, gradually turn it on, and then they'll start running them through the valves themselves, through the timer. But most important thing is if you do have somebody coming over to start up your system, you're going to want to have the water turned on inside your house before they arrive. And the valve, there's a valve shutoff on the outside of your house typically, there's supposed to be. They call it emergency shutoff or a source main shutoff, and that should be turned to the complete off position, but the water is charged behind it, ready to go. Then when the guys show up, all they have to do is go in, they can run the system, they've got some water to test it. If there's any breaks, they can repair them, and then they're good to go. So there's always lots to know about irrigation. We try to do our best to teach a little bit about that, but spring is here and it's time to start up the irrigation and time to cut back the butterfly bushes and finish up our pruning for the season. So that's it for today on the Okanagan Garden Report. Thanks very much for tuning in.